And I did do that. I had to remember to remind myself in that whole thing because, you know, he lived in a different time. In my era, I had a draft card. And the draft card, and if you younger ones don't know what I'm talking about, you didn't miss anything. Because you always felt that it was in your wallet, you see. And so when I used to have to go someplace and take out something, you know, now, you know, I got the old Bi-Mart card I show all the time, or I got a Costco card, but in those days you have to show your draft card or people would ask you what your draft status was, and then if you moved you had to, you know, contact your draft board, and so it's kind of always on your mind. But this time around I thought, well, what did Stafford do, you know? And I realized that in time of war, there's a big choice. I grew up pretty much between wars, so it was pretty peaceful. So I never thought, well, should I be this or should I be that? I just got with my draft card. That's something we could talk about later on. As a matter of fact, I hope that what I present to you is with you in mind, relatable to your own life. You see, so just so far by mentioning draft card or something, you might think about your own past, you know, people you knew that were in the service or were not, or, you know, relatives. There's something there, I think, that, and some of you may go back and remember wars and this and that. There's something there that perhaps just by coming here tonight, this may trigger something in you. Stafford said a very a well-known thing. He and I were at a teachers conference, and we were sitting up here in a panel. People were asking us questions, and they asked him, they said, Mr. Stafford, when did you start writing? And then he said, when did you stop writing? I thought that was interesting because, you know, when we grew up, we were all writing. We all learned how to write, and we're all literate, you know, but something in us, maybe we're not required to anymore, we stop. So I hope that you could start, or maybe you still are writing, because, you know, you have things in your mind and your heart that no one else knows about, you see, and you have that. And so that's something to consider. At any rate, the last time I called Pam, I told her, okay, thank you for the directions to the art center and everything like that. And I said, boy, it's going to be interesting for me because the week before I get to Pendleton, I'm going over to Tokyo for the first time in my life. And I said, I don't know how I'm going to do, what's going to happen, et cetera, but I'm going to keep Pendleton in mind, you know, and maybe when I get there, you know, I'll keep having Pendleton in my mind and I'll make some kind of comparison or something. So, see there, you're laughing, you're laughing. So anyway, okay, I wrote this piece, and you talk about first draft. Look at this, you know, look at this, folks. It's got the correctional fluid in there and this and that, and it's sort of, I realized by first draft, you mean it's been through many drafts. First it goes through your mind, and the first draft of this was when I was in Tokyo, thinking about, boy, what am I going to do right about to bring to Pendleton, you see. And then when I got home, took some notes and this and that, and so I pretty much just finished it up this morning. But it was, you know, I had it kind of laid out pretty well, but then poetry, you know, it depends on how it sounds, and note for note you go through it, and so this is what I have, all right, so I'll share it with you. This is a world premiere, by the way. And not only that, it's maybe, it's site-specific. I think I've heard that term, where I think you'll see what I'm talking about, you know, but I think if I were to read it next week in Medford or something, people wouldn't get it, or, you know, it would lose its effect, okay? So this is for right here for tonight. It's called Tokyo Time. Of course, I was well aware that the so-called international dateline didn't really exist. It was a construct, an applied abstraction like longitude and latitude, useful for purposes of demarcation and navigation. Still, somewhere over the Pacific, the plane had a hiccup, had a subtle but specific hitch in its giddy-up, and in that watershed moment, it seemed there was a shift, like a role reversal between the classes on board. At the San Francisco airport, it was obvious. There were those of us who belonged. Then there were those who were foreigners. Thus, while we were obviously confident, calm, at ease, they were obviously nervous, ill at ease, as they glanced around, gawking, whispering furtively. Part 2. Now, however, they seemed to take on an assertiveness as their talk grew louder in the plane, as their toddlers romped around more, as their infants squalled louder. And the rest of us now had to contend with their collective assertion that we had entered their space, that we were their foreigners, and it was their turn now. As for me, well, I thought I could pass for one of them. Maybe. But I knew darn well that my blatant demeanor had betrayed me, that my attitude exuded me, and that my body language had shouted out loud as I moseyed my cool, drive-through American self to and from the John. And in the meantime, you better believe it, I had Pendleton on my mind, because by way of chronology, Tokyo came before Pendleton on my July calendar. So even though I had never been to Tokyo, whatever happened in Tokyo would lead up to how I would be and what I would do in good old Pendleton, US of A. So poor little Tokyo was relegated in my mind to being the opening act before the biggie finale right now at this Pendleton Center for the Arts. Part 5. And why shouldn't we say Tokyo and Pendleton in the same breath? They're just a couple of places on the planet. One's got a woolen mill, the other deals with silk. One says, let her buck, while the other says, please don't buck, referring to earthquakes. So, other than that, life goes on about the same, as we know. And though there's the matter of scale, life is life, obviously. So although Pendleton is bigger than, say, Echo or Athena or Mission, that doesn't make it any better. And actually, Tokyo's famed International House Hotel with its elegant amenities was, if anything, a cut below the Grand Hotel of the Wild Horse Casino with its elegant wagering. And then there's what, part 6, and then there's what the Eastern Oregon wheat farmer told me. I trucked my harvest down to the Columbia so it can get shipped over to Japan, where it gets processed and packaged and shipped back to us as instant ramen noodles. They eat it over there, we eat it over here. So what am I getting at here? Well, as you can understand, especially if you've been back to your own ancestral homeland, it did me good to go beyond my beaten path, to undergo some confusion, some displacement, some discomfort, and to somewhat re-immigrate to my own nation, but not in any way as challenging as what my grandparents endured. And in this nation of perceived divisions, divides between us, date lines, fate lines, longitudes, latitudes, I believe we can readily transcend those whatevers by combining, without hardly trying, something like a Pendleton perspective with Tokyo time. Thank you.